to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Well, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock from 5 to 6, 1460 on your AM dial and worldwide at WVOX.com. And the mission of this program is to help you lead a healthier life and to achieve a state of wellness so that every day when you wake up, you feel better than you did the day before. You know, I learned it myself the same way I'm going to sort of share this with you, that, you know, when I got to my midlife, I realized that things weren't the same as they used to be. And it wasn't just my body. It was a number of other things that were just contributing to this ailing feeling that I had. Of course, in my practice, I realized that people were also sick. You know, they were sick with medical conditions that were labeled. They had diagnoses. And there were a combination of those factors really led most people to wake up feeling a little less than desired. When I went back to school, I began to really appreciate the fact, when I went back to school to study integrative medicine and holistic medicine, I came back to appreciate that what's on our mind has a lot to do with what affects our body. And I started to ask people more questions about their life. And when you ask questions about life, you know, sometimes you leave out certain questions that you think are particularly provocative or maybe too personal, like questions about sex or questions about money. Well, today I want to talk to you about the latter. We'll get to sex another day. But I want to talk about our relationship to money and how, in fact, if that conversation is left off the table in even a doctor's office, even certainly in a therapist's office, then we may be overlooking something that I see as fundamental to what it contributes to the ailments for most people. Our financial health then becomes a big part of our general health and well-being. So today we're going to talk to somebody who is part of our team of Slow Medicine Associates. He's the Slow Medicine Abundist, and we're going to talk about that term and more on abundance. But that's the subject today, is how you could lead a more abundant life and so doing be a healthier person, because the two are quite related, as you'll hear more about. Peter Harris is the name of my guest, and he's the health coach and financial planning consultant who works with his clients and ours who are interested in connecting the world of heart as well as money. He works with couples and professionals who struggle with financial issues, of course, and in particular their psychospiritual impact. He actually, like I did, went to school very conventionally. He went to Columbia Business School and had his Bachelor's of Arts in Economics from Boston University. But he also went back to school to study other things, including integrative nutrition at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and as a CTI-trained life coach. So this is a very well-rounded person who understands that though money may be the underpinning of this conversation, that it really does relate and connects the dots to a lot of other things that go on in our lives. So, Peter, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome. So, and thanks for being here. So, you know, we were working the last couple of months to bring you into the team of the Slow Medicine Associates. We were talking about terms, you know, what to call you. And we didn't want to call you the financial health coach or other things because, you know, while this is about money, isn't it? It's more about our relationship to the things that make the world go round for us, which in the capitalistic societies that we live in, you know, includes currency. But there's more to what makes us feel whole and full. And for that, we came up with the word abundance, you know, to allude to the concept of abundance. So maybe you can start there. Tell us, what's the difference between abundance and a good balance sheet?
Yeah. I think the way I relate to the the term abundance. I think really it's a state of mind and a state of being. I think a healthy balance sheet is great, and it can help us feel abundant. But I think abundance stems from a more primary state of mind and a state of being. And financial issues can often be obstacles, or our minds and our egos can use financial problems, quote, problems, as an excuse to feel lacking or not abundant. But abundance is really a state of mind to me. And to get to that state of abundance, contrary to, I think, our, the zeitgeist or this, Western philosophy of more is better and, material wealth, I think it's really about tapping into what really matters to us. In what situations are we in healthy relationship, and what is it that we really want? And so really getting in touch with ourselves and connecting with our inner selves and those around us, to me, is the start of abundance. And eventually that can manifest into material, financial wealth, but that is secondary to abundance for me.
Yeah, as you're speaking, and I know we've had many conversations before, but the idea that I know you drive home for the people that you speak with is that if money is the primary focus, then we can lose track of some of these other things that we want money for. Mm-hmm. And so we may actually arrive at having that money and then not have friends and family to share it with. Or we don't ever arrive at it because we push the target to some arbitrary point, and often that's pretty far and further than what we actually need to be content. And contentment then being that state of mind and often the quality of our relationships. Is that correct? Yeah.
I think what you're pointing to, which is I think one of the fundamental teachings of any spiritual tradition and any, in my opinion, worthwhile personal growth framework, is that left to its devices, our minds, our egos, it's just this bottomless pit. If we project happiness and fulfillment into some kind of external goal, like a number in our bank account or a number of houses or cars or whatever it is, what I think most people find from experience is once you hit that target, you realize that this mechanism of just of constant want, the craving for more, is still there. So if you put as I think about it, the cart before the horse, and live your life from some kind of specific monetary goal. If I can just get this, house, or if I can just get this job, or if I can just, get $1 million in my bank account or $1 billion in my bank account, I'll be happy. I'll feel safe.
Yeah. So you wait until that point until you start living your life.
Yeah.
And then for many people, time goes by. There is, though, a practical issue, though, which is that, for many people, it's not this arbitrary far-off point, but even the day-to-day becomes a challenge. Mm-hmm. That they're struggling with really just some basic needs. Of course, that's a very important situation that needs to be remedied. But I think what happens is very often people choose jobs, choose careers, choose paths because of a promise. And therefore, rather than doing something they love or they're passionate about where they may actually be best at and then generate the best results economically as well as personal satisfaction, people wind up down paths and doing things in a way they can't be successful with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what you just described is actually my personal experience and my own journey in money and in finance and in life. My strategy for living, my philosophy was that if I can get enough money, if I can get this job, if I could successfully execute this certain career, then at the end of that rainbow, I would find happiness, I would find health, wholeness, love, all these things that are fundamental to this abundance that we all seek. But what I, kind of learned very slowly and painfully walking down this path was, I was undermining these very things that I have: my health, my relationships, I was undermining them by following this path that wasn't aligned with a deeper part of myself. I was successful in my most immediate goal, which was to make more money, but I found that that ultimately undermined what I really wanted, which was happiness.
Right. So there was an emptiness,
yes,
which is the antithesis of the abundance. So the abundance experience is one where people could have a sense of fullness, even without as much riches, at least material riches. And that's the trick here. That's the balance point. If one could do that effectively, and that's, sort of what we'll call the slow medicine approach then to financial health, is to find a way to do that effectively where for every dollar you actually have, you have the experience of greater fullness. That means you're spending your money more wisely. You're finding the balance between saving and spending and choices in such a way that there's a greater efficiency, not for the sake of the money that winds up in the account or how many things you can actually buy, but just the process creates and generates this experience.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's important what you mentioned about connecting the dots between money and fulfillment. From what I've said so far, it could be easy to maybe interpret that as, oh, money's not important, or I don't need money. And I think, depending on your, for some people that's true. For sages and saints like Ramana Maharshi or, Mother Teresa, I'm sure that they probably have less practical needs. I imagine that they're on a high level of evolution or consciousness. But for the majority of us, I think there are certain physical practical needs we have, and connecting the dots and being conscious of how money relates to your well-being and abundance is important. So that's part of the practical work that I do with my clients.
Yeah, which I want to get into. So to me, it's like the analogy that I've shared on this show before about food and about hunger. That there is physical hunger. We need to eat. A lot of people eat more than they need to eat from their physical body point of view. The hunger that generates those types of cravings often are emotional hunger or spiritual hunger. And so that if our life feels empty in terms of our relationships or in terms of the higher relationship to the greater being or nature of existence itself, if we don't really have a good feeling about those things, then we sort of need more contact. And we find it in food, perhaps, and we overeat, or we find substances that sort of temporizes and quenches, that thirst. In the finance piece, if we find fulfillment in ways that are not economical, in, again, quality of relationships, in our relationship to the natural world or to the divine, then our needs, our financial hunger, is different. And that's why I said earlier, at least my thought is on all of this, learning from you, that if we create better balance that way, we do more with less. Not that we want less necessarily and want to have to struggle. There's some basic amount that we need to get through our day and support ourselves and our families. But often we overeat in that regard and sort of have eyes for more food than we need because we're looking at the wrong source.
Exactly.
Or,
yeah.
I don't want to use the word wrong. This is one of my own rules. At a source that's less functional.
Appropriate for, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think, from my own personal experience, there was this sense because I was negating or neglecting, I wasn't conscious of all these deeper needs that I had, these spiritual relationship interpersonal needs I had that were completely being left unfulfilled. And the strategy I had was if I can just shovel enough money into that hole, somehow something will happen that I'll feel complete. The surprising but also very liberating discovery I made after having a somewhat of a personal crisis and an awakening of sorts was that on the physical needs side is actually I needed very little. And I think that's the case for most people is if you can surrender or give up some of these ideals that our society kind of programs us with, you'll find that your needs, your physical needs, and especially in today's world, and especially if you're living in a country like America, it's quite simple to meet very practical, material, financial needs. And the other side of the picture, the spiritual, personal growth, relationship area of life, then becomes, when that becomes the focus, at least in my experience, I found just another completely different paradigm of fulfillment that I wasn't experiencing before.
Yeah, so you use that word experience. I'm sort of hearing in my head, it's things versus experience. Mm-hmm. So, this is the time of year where people start thinking about gifts for family and friends, children in particular. And, as a parent, I do want to provide and give my children acknowledgement in the form of giving them something, a gift that they can hold on to and, say, oh, Daddy gave me this. And it's sort of lovely. However, I've learned in certain ways from their feedback that if I give them an experience as the gift, like I, go to a ball game with them or, spend the whole afternoon driving up to the countryside or visiting an animal farm or something like that with them, where I'm not really spending that much money and there's nothing concrete to go home with, but it's a full day. It becomes a memory that has this energy and a currency of love that, to me, is particularly valuable. And I'm remembering my own childhood in terms of what my parents gave me, and a lot of it had to do with those experiences. And those are the memories that lasted the longer. I can't tell you that I have any of the toys that I received as a child that I still possess with nearly the same affinity and affection as the experience.
Yeah, you're touching on a topic I was discussing actually with a close friend of mine pretty recently, and it hits on another, I think, a zeitgeist or this programming that we have in our society as parents. I'm not a parent myself, but I see this a lot, especially with my friends who are becoming parents and the parents that I know well. There's this idea that the most valuable thing I can do for my children is give them lots of material wealth. Spend lots of money to get them the best food or the best teachers or the best send them the most expensive college, and all that's great. But it's my experience, both from being the recipient of, I think, pretty good parents, is that I think the most beneficial thing I got was the time and the love and the learning from that experience, being with my parents, that I know was contributed most to my who I am and what I'm grateful for. So it can be helpful to examine what are the assumptions that you have about what it is to be a valuable parent, because they say 90% of whatever's done in this country is to pay off a mortgage, or and I could relate that to 90% of what's done in this country is to send the kids to college or something, whatever it is. And I think to re-examine that assumption that maybe there's something that you can pass on to your children that's less capital intensive and more interpersonal.
Right. And that gets to the idea of what's our goals, and then based on that, then what are our needs? And they change when our goals are reframed and redefined that include more experience and less things. So now, walk us through a little bit in terms of how you get started with your clients. What's the process? And you were talking about, this is what you do with clients. So how do you usually get that conversation going?
Yeah. I think the first, I like to start kind of with the big picture first. I think it's really important to put into context kind of the biggest picture. What's the most important thing? So I usually start out by asking my clients 3 questions. The first, which is probably a familiar question to some people, is if you had all the money in the world, money wasn't a problem, what would you do with your life? Who would you be? what would bring you fulfillment? And people are often surprised at what they find when they answer that question. And what that elicits is, what's valuable? What's the most important thing for me? And what fulfills me? What brings me abundance? So those answer the really big questions right up front. And then to go a little deeper into that, I'll ask them, the second question I ask them is, if, you went to the doctor and they said, in 10 years, you have 10 years to live. What would change? How does the answer you just said change? And what that gets at kind of more deep, more urgent things that maybe are undone, unspoken. Usually relational things will come out, and usually the work then gets a little bit deeper, and I get a real sense of what's important to this client. And then the deepest question is, if you were at the end of this session, we're going to pass on. What did you miss? What did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? Who did you not get to be with? Mm. And I find that really kind of hits home. And once you have answered these questions, it's like a foundation. Okay, that's really what's important. And everything else we're going to do together is to facilitate those things that are most important to you. And then from there, it's a combination of just traditional financial planning, and I integrate a lot of my coaching, inner kind of psycho-spiritual work with my clients to kind of connect the dots and consistently get back to what's important, while also creating a plan, developing skills, raising awareness in your life around finances, where you're spending money, how are you saving, why aren't you saving. That's kind of the process.
Well, there's obviously more we're going to talk about in this show and following. We're going to take a break, and I want you to think about those questions for yourself and maybe give us a call, 914-636-0110, if you'd like to speak to Peter and me about some of these questions and what kind of impact they had on you just now, and maybe how that maybe resets your thinking about what you need or how you're approaching your life, the practical aspects of the finances that you're dealing with. Because I have a feeling that this is the beginning of creating that context where now we refine what it is that we're trying to achieve, so that we're not wasting time, we're not wasting energy, we're not thinking we need more than we do, and we're not spending capital, that's either financial capital or even emotional, mental capital or time, on something that doesn't contribute to that goal.
Exactly.
I think that's very important. So again, we'll take a break, but call us, write this number down, call us, 914-636-0110. You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio, and we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of that fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. I'm speaking to the Slow Medicine Abundist, Peter Harris, who participates in a lot of our work at Sunraven, the home of slow medicine. In fact, has an upcoming workshop on Saturday, January 21st. That would be 2017. And it's called A Slow Medicine Approach to Financial Health. And that's what we're talking about now, which is this approach. And I've got to believe most people probably pretty regularly are thinking about their financial situation and working it, probably not feeling particularly comfortable at any given moment. And, just like our bodies calling us to pay attention to something, this is another one of those lights on the dashboard that say, hey, over here, over here. And so that's the essence of this conversation. So, Peter, again, thank you for joining us. And if you want to call and ask a question, then the number is 914-636-0110. I'm thinking that many of you are maybe appreciating the essence of the conversation, but still have like sort of a practical question. But that sounds great, but I've got this mortgage, and my job is tenuous, and I'm working a job and a half or two jobs, and people around me are working, and so Peter. So with that in mind, he talked a little bit about the three questions you ask people, which I think are incredibly insightful. And then, some of the things that you do, which you said follow the lines of more conventional work when it comes to learning about how to manage money and resources. What's involved? You mentioned there were in particular some questions, that people have about, and the impact of these decisions on their emotional state, their spiritual state. So what comes up in your conversations with people?
Yeah. You bring up a really good point about just that state of anxiety and how that can lead to other problems. I think, like as you said at the beginning of the show, two of the most charged issues in our culture, sex and money. There's so much cultural expectations, judgment, shame. There's a lot of deep stuff that gets put on these two topics, money as well. And so I think the most important part, I feel the most important part of my work is kind of getting through that barrier that a lot of people have to examining this. It can be so charged. People are, so many people are, and I know this from my own personal experience, again, in a state of denial around money. They can't even look at it. They can't even talk about their financial situation because it brings up so much either shame, fear, and so just on a practical but also a very spiritual level, just working with my clients to be able to hold whatever that is around money. So if, for instance, someone who's has a lot of shame around that, they're either not doing as well financially as they'd like to be, and they have a lot of judgment around that. Just being able to get someone in touch with that that feeling, that emotion that exists, and be able to hold that in a secure space so that they can experience it, acknowledge it, not be in denial anymore, and then move beyond. It's unless we deal with those issues, it doesn't matter how much money is going to be in the bank. In our bank, we're going to be in a state of, like you said, fight or flight, in a state of imbalance. I grew up in probably one of the wealthiest areas in the world, Greenwich, Connecticut, and some of the most wealthy people I knew were the most anxious, imbalanced, fearful people. They on the material level, they had very little to be afraid of. And so, for me, I see primarily what I do is help people work through a lot of the emotional things. There is the practical aspect. So, depending on your situation, I can help create financial plans and help a client practice awareness over their finances. So literally on a weekly or monthly basis, sit down with them, look at what they're spending their money on, and ask pointed questions about that. So, I see you're spending, 10% of your income on, dining out or booze or whatever it is. And it's not about judging or, saying you should do this or that, creating a budget. It's really just asking pointed questions. How does that connect? How does the 20% that you're spending on your car, how does that connect to your value that you said earlier around whatever it is. I have a value around my children, or I have a value around growing spiritually, or I have a value around being healthy. Okay, how does this serve that? And so just bringing consciousness from the practical to the bigger piece.
I think you said something really important, which is the non-judgment piece of it. It's already clear that people are maybe their harshest critic, their own personal critic, which is why they don't bring some of these things to attention and eventually learn how not even to show it to themselves, because they know what their own response to it is. But then to air it and let somebody else who they think might be, knowledgeable and may have personal feelings and reactions and judgment, that is an inhibitor, really, of this type of conversation. So what I have always found, knowing you for the many years that I have already, is that you're relatable, and that you don't come at this with that in your own description of your work, in your own bio, you talk about connecting the heart to the matter. And that's sort of how you lead, and I think that's what we need. We don't need more brains sometimes in our lives. Most people are actually quite intelligent themselves. They need some aspect of heart reconditioning, and for that, somebody who may have the expertise and the brains and the knowledge and the training that you have, of course, but then really leads with this other feature. Because you're right. I mean, why would you put out there how much money you spend on something that may not contribute to those values, and list it for somebody to look at or yourself if you don't feel safe and secure? And and perhaps it's that insecurity that leads to some of that, the craving, which leads to some of that behavior. This is not completely different than things we might label as addictions.
Yeah.
The concept of debt often, is spoken of in that way. But again, between you and me, right away, I want to say that this is not judgment, though. These words sometimes are pretty harsh. They come across with that edge, which is not what we want to do now. I mean, I know we want people to understand that, no, the slow medicine approach to financial health is really about holding space. And it's putting it side by side with how you feed yourself in other ways and your relationships, so that it's not all this on that subject. The way around is to get organized, of course, but also to take care of how you feed yourself, literally, how you attend to your relationships, how you rest and restore yourself, and then maybe through those practices you find that your behavior around the subject of money shifts. Not because you're smarter or because you know something new, but the energy that leads you to other behaviors is just diffusing.
Exactly. Yeah. What you're saying is I think reminding me of a point about financial. It's very easy to be intimidated by the seeming complexity and just array of different products and methods out there around finances. And what I've learned is it's actually quite simple. It's very simple. And what makes it hard is those emotional blocks. And, unless you have a very complicated estate with, complicated financial transactions or wills or, you really, financial advising and sound financial behavior is quite a simple endeavor. Warren Buffett, one of my early mentors before I got into this work, said, investing is incredibly like losing weight. It's incredibly simple but hard to do. And why is it hard? Because there's so much emotion. There's so much of our behavioral baggage that gets attached onto it. And it's the same with managing your personal finances. So when I work with clients, it's usually the creating a spending plan and helping them with investments and things of that nature is a small part of the work. But the most fruitful and the most, I think, satisfying and fulfilling piece of the work is really connecting the finance to the rest of their life and really discovering through the work that we do together what makes this person tick, what makes this person happy, and helping them create more of that in their lives.
To get clear. And of course, that process, the clarity reduces anxiety, and that itself contributes to why this becomes easier and easier to do over time. And this are very practical things, but you're on it when you talk about how all those emotions come up. Like to write down everything you spend money on every day, which is really the basics of it. Let's say you spend money 10 times a day. I don't know what the average would be, but I'm going to make up a number. 10 times a day you actually spend money, whether it's paying a bill or getting a cup of coffee or going to a grocery store, going to a movie, whatever it is. 10 times, you write it down. Now, frankly, that could take you about a minute to write down 10 times. But I know one of the things that you do when you sort of make that suggestion is you say, okay, now add to what you did practically, like I bought a cup of coffee, what you were feeling emotionally at that time, at that moment of pulling out your wallet. And then seeing if there's patterns of spending and feelings. Mm-hmm. Even the self-ridicule, the judgment. I feel guilty, I feel shame, I feel whatever. Not because you're going to be made to feel guilty and shameful about having those feelings. Those are all human emotions. Every single person has them. Mm-hmm. But it's just to see if there's patterns, because let's say something keeps coming up. Then you have an access point. Mm-hmm. Then you have a subject to discuss, perhaps, or to explore, at least with an eye toward alleviating perhaps some of the faulty thinking or the habits or the other things. It's step by step. This is not a quick fix. Nothing about slow medicine is a quick fix, but this is about a process that feels hopeful. Yeah.
And what you're describing is just, I think, what this process at its essence is. It's just raising consciousness. And that can mean a lot of things, but one of my teachers and kind of the sources of inspiration that I got into this work, one of his tenets is that anything you bring to consciousness will just by the nature of consciousness itself will heal. And I think to the degree that we keep things suppressed, repressed, or in denial, whatever it is, that's our shadow, right? Those are the things that are causing disease in us. And so this process, it's just in a non-judgmental and a very secure way, bringing things to consciousness, and specifically financial things in consciousness. So like you said, that exercise, very simple, hard to do because it brings up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, but with a certain amount of, frankly, hand-holding, encouragement, support, common sense, and persistence. Somebody's committed. This process I have found and I've witnessed, it makes a big difference for people. Because, again, you can go to an accountant, you can go to a business planner, and you can get the nuts and bolts out of it. But you said following it is really the trick, and to follow it then when these things surface, which they will, requires another skill set altogether. And there are not that many people who partner the intelligence of a financial planner and the business background that you have with the real caring quality and the understanding of this broader perspective that life is about. Mm-hmm. So that you're not creating a new pattern in a vacuum, sort of arbitrarily. But as you said, those first three questions guide people to the real prize, what it is that they really want to accomplish, and, giving them the feedback along the way. If you want to call us, again, the number is 914-636-0110. Anything on this subject. And frankly, if you want to throw in a curveball and ask me about another subject on your health, I can handle it. What I want to really do is provide you this opportunity to, as Peter said, consciousness, airing something is the first step toward healing it. And sometimes we feel awkward and uncomfortable, almost embarrassed to bring it up, but I promise you that everyone who's listening, myself included, has experienced what you're experiencing at some point, because we're all human. We share a condition, a certain frailty, a certain desire to be loved and cared for, and so we want to do things well so that we deserve that type of caring and affirmation. And we know when we maybe fall offline a little bit, and we sort of are quicker than anyone else to understand that about our own behavior. So we share this. Imagine if we just agreed to be really nice to each other, really supportive, give each other sort of a second chance opportunities, when our heart's really into it and when we're really truly committed to our personal development this way and our collective good. This is why, this is what will change and shift the world right now, which is in need of this fractionation. I think we're done with that. I think we need to sort of pull back the pieces, see our shared humanity, and connect those dots and create a new state of wholeness, which is another word for health. Again, the number is 914-636-0110. Peter, tell us a little bit about the workshop you have planned for January 21st.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be in partnership with your wife, the slow medicine therapist. And the idea is to introduce just some of the basic concepts and practices that I do with my clients. And it's all based actually off the work of a longtime financial planner, and he was a meditation teacher as well. His name's George Kinder. And he wrote this book called The 7 Stages of Money Maturity, which, in my opinion, is an awful name for a book. Very intimidating. The word money maturity sends a lot of people running for the hills, myself included. But it's a really beautiful work, and it really integrates the spiritual, the personal growth, the emotional component of money into the practical. And so this workshop is based on my work and the work of George Kinder. So we're just basically introducing the tenets, some practices, and having people be able, as you were saying, air their either their questions, maybe insecurities, the idea is so people can feel they're not alone in this, because I think that's a huge aspect of healing. It's really hard to do this in a vacuum. I think that's one of maybe the most valuable thing that I think I give my clients is the sense that they're not doing this alone. And it's okay that they're where they are.
I think sometimes too, what we notice, and the reason why we have these types of programs at Sunraven itself, is that when you bring individuals together, couples, families, with other families, other individuals, community senses that it's binding together. It's a state of security. We become the safety net for each other in some ways. The workshop will start when?
The workshop is, as you said, January 21st. It's a Saturday, and it'll be 10:30 in the morning to 4 p.m. And we'll have lunch together. We'll talk about some of the strategies and tools that I use in my coaching, and we'll have a chance to share our own kind of personal challenges. I'll share kind of my story. And hopefully it'll be fun, educational, and fulfilling.
And give people something practical to go home with as a basis to get started on their own.
Yeah, so we'll have a packet that people will follow the workshop with, and a lot of the exercises involve internal inventories, looking into our own internal innocent beliefs, getting in touch with where the pain points we have around money, and then inventorying areas where we actual material, practical steps we can take to begin to heal.
Yeah, that's good. So that's going to be January 21st at Sunraven in Bedford. And for more information, you can go on our website, slowmedicine.org. So I think also we have somebody on the phone who's been waiting patiently to participate in this conversation. Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio.
Hi, thank you. I had a question for Peter, and it's so funny listening to this show because I recently did probably the hardest thing, which was sit down and actually calculate out absolutely every penny I spend. And I did a 3-month inventory at the advice of my financial planner. In any event, I cannot even begin to tell you all of the emotions that came up when I saw how mindlessly I had been spending money, and all of the emotions that brought up. And I guess, my question, and maybe this is the kind of thing your workshop really goes into sort of on that psycho-spiritual perspective you mentioned earlier, I realized that I had a lot of conflicted thoughts about money and wealth and abundance, and it had me thinking of how does one find balance when, so many of the tapes you've played in your head is, life is a struggle, and, money kind of root of all evil, and, money has a kind of nasty connotation around it, for a lot of people, particularly, if you were raised, not having a lot of money. And so I just wondered, how do you find the balance? How do you appreciate money and feel comfortable wanting it and, ultimately having it? And just, I don't know. I guess, again, all of these conflicted emotions came up around money once I kind of really looked at it.
Wow, yeah. Thank you so much for your question. And it's a really good question and something that I deal a lot with. And totally. So what I'm hearing is you're asking, so I wrote down all these, all my spending and all these conflicted emotions and beliefs about money came up. How do I deal with that? That's a huge part of the work. So I think one of the principles that the work that I do teaches is that all these programs that we were raised with, first of all, they're not your fault, right? You're not at fault for having whatever belief you have about money. It's very likely a result of your upbringing, your parents, our culture. We're really very vulnerable at a young age to this programming. So it's really not you. You don't have to worry about feeling any shame or judgment around them, and just kind of being okay with that conflict. That's just one of the first steps. And then the second piece I would say is, whatever the programming, your money is evil, but I want money. That's a lot of the times that's the kind of the pull we have. Money's materialistic, or money's evil, or money's the root of all evil. That's a very common program we can be raised with. But the beautiful thing is that, all of these things, there's not one belief that's true, completely, absolutely true, or completely, absolutely false. There's truth. There's a certain degree of truth in all of these things. But what we do is we, and I know this from my own personal experience, you lose the balance. So I grew up with the kind of one belief around, money, actually, it's not the root of all evil. Money is the greatest good. And in order to live, the most beneficial life I can, I need to have as much of it as possible. And I was horrified when I discovered this belief I had. I was so judgmental to myself. And that's okay. In our culture, it's very common to be programmed with something like that. But then to realize, okay, how has this belief served me? Or what did this belief protect me from? Understand, how that belief came in, and just accept that, but not energize it anymore with your full belief. So you can be aware of it, but not fully necessarily buy into it. Does that answer your question, or?
It does, and I guess it's a lot like losing weight, right? It's easy to do, but it's it's easy, but it's hard to do. I think fundamentally, I guess what I know I need to change some of my thinking, and I know and ultimately some of my behaviors around it. But I think you did. You certainly addressed it. And I think even having this conversation is pretty good for me.
And just to you're just doing this exercise, and having the courage to come on this show and speak about this, and examine these things, putting them out in the open. As I said kind of earlier, you're bringing these things to consciousness, and so you're already actually in the process of healing them. So you're already doing what needs to be done. So just holding those beliefs, just allowing your awareness to come rest on these things that were within you, that you were maybe avoiding or just completely unconscious of, it's going to bring up stuff. Maybe there's shame there. Maybe there's, I should have done this, or I wish my dad or mom had taught me that. And just be with that internal story, that internal tape. Know that that's not who you are. That's not, and we all have this. So you're doing the work, and it sounds like you're on your way. It sounds like you have a pretty good financial advisor.
I'm going to add.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This is very validating.
Let me just before you hang up, let me just add my perspective on one aspect of this, which is the concept of anxiety and how that relates to money, and the concept of abundance. So a lot of the times we want money not only to pay for what we want and feel we need now, but we have some sort of anticipation that we may need more of it later. So we have to store it up, because who knows what's going to happen a few years from now. I might need more than I need now. Like retirement is a good example. But something might happen. I might get sick. My house might get burned down. I mean, all these catastrophes, all these things we worry about. So we have anxiety that increases the demand for more money now to, at least if we don't use it today, we at least store it, like storing extra grain for famine. So the concept, the more anxiety we have, the more money we're going to feel we need. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely.
And so the idea of abundance is, if you look at the word abundance and define it this way, as the absence of anxiety. When you have a lot less, or let's say you can arbitrarily, hypothetically get to no anxiety, you would be fully abundant. You would have exactly what you need. There'd be no anxiety. There'd be no anticipation. There'd be no worry. You'd be completely full. So the goal here is not just to have more, or even have more balance in terms of how you spend money, although that's part of it. What you've been talking to Peter, it makes a lot of sense, just to come to terms with the reality, accept it, know that airing it is contributing. But then there's another feature, which is all the other anxiety pools that you may have. Focusing there allows you, if you reduce that anxiety, all of a sudden your relationship to money changes. Not because you forced that change, but because you've worked on the anxiety. And now think about anxiety, your health, your relationships, your parents, your children, society, war, illness, all these things that we do worry about. Figure out another way to approach those and put those in perspective and say, hey, those might be true also, but they don't have to plague me quite the same. And if you can work there, then you've got a twofold approach to this subject. And I think you wind up feeling better and better and better.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you so much. Great show. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling. So Peter, we have only a couple of minutes. And so I wanted to, in closing, just see if you had any final thoughts and then information about how people can reach you. Of course, they can come to Sunraven on January 21st, and they could contact us at Sunraven by emailing info@slowmedicine.org or going to the website slowmedicine.org to make an appointment to see you personally for private consultation. Come to the workshop on the 21st. But tell us other things that you're actively involved with and other ways that people can learn about this type of work.
Yeah, thanks. I obviously with the now partnering with the Slow Medicine, you can find me at the Michael's website. I also partner with a institute called the Mind-Kind Institute, and that's a company of executive and executive coaches that would do interpersonal, a lot of spiritual and executive coaching. And I, through partnership with them, I have an online workshop. It's called Mindfulness for Ease with Money. And it's a month-long course that explores a lot of what we've been talking about today. And it involves having 5 video conference calls in a group setting with myself. That's probably the best way to get involved if people want to try working on these areas of their life.
Well, thank you again for joining me. This is a good time of year to discuss this. As the year wraps up, as we start thinking about next year, resolutions, just to come into harmony, a state of balance, accepting what is, and having something practical, a practical wisdom to guide us to deal with something that often is the gorilla in the room or the elephant in the room. got the right phrase, but the idea that this is often sitting there and something that we just pay a little bit of attention to, find a way around it to be a little bit more easy. Other things that are going on in Sunraven coming up are our open house, Slow Medicine Cafe on December 18th. And we also have a new moon ceremony on December 29th. And all this could be found on our website, slowmedicine.org. And next week, we'll have the Slow Medicine Dream Weaver. Somebody's going to talk to us about our dream at the night. Until then, for this week, wish you well and peace and love everywhere.